The heat pressed down heavy, the kind that made the air shimmer over the dirt and the wooden boards creak beneath boots. Dust clung to every surface in that border town, but nowhere was it thicker than at the old auction yard. Men gathered there with their hats pulled low, their mouths busy with tobacco, their eyes darting and measuring. Cattle, horses, tools, anything could be bought and sold. But that day, the air carried a different weight, because on the platform stood women, one by one paraded as if they were livestock, their fates tied to the loud crack of the auctioneer's voice. By the time the last woman was led forward, the yard had thinned. Some buyers had already left, satisfied with their choices. Others lingered, leaning back in their chairs or shifting restlessly in the dirt, tired of the heat. She stood there at the edge of the stage, her body stiff though her knees felt like water. Her dress had once been white, or maybe cream, but now it was dust-stained and frayed at the hem. The ribbon tied at her wrist was faded and loose, but she held onto it as if it were a lifeline. She tried to lift her chin, to keep her spine straight even when the auctioneer's words stripped her down to nothing but a price. Her eyes scanned the faces below her, desperate for kindness, but all she found were sneers, mutters, and dismissive glances. The younger, prettier women had gone first, snatched up quickly by men who wanted beauty more than companionship. A few of the men looked her way and then shook their heads, their mouths curling as if she were a horse past its prime. Each rejection carved deeper into her chest, though she refused to let tears fall. Not here, not now. The auctioneer's voice grew louder, his desperation obvious. Last bride left, strong, capable, knows her way round a homestead. Who'll start me off? Who's got the backbone to take her home? Silence followed, broken only by the shifting of boots and the distant whinny of a horse. The woman's heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. The ground tilted beneath her. For a moment, she imagined herself left standing there as the crowd drifted away, unwanted, unsold, forgotten. And then, movement. At the back of the crowd, a man shifted, slow and deliberate. He had been there the whole time, silent and still, leaning against a post with his hat pulled down low. She hadn't noticed him at first because he hadn't bid on anyone, hadn't even spoken. But now, as the auctioneer's eyes swept the crowd in desperation, the man's hand rose. It was not a confident gesture, not the kind of bold wave she had seen earlier from other buyers. It was hesitant, weighted, as if even lifting his arm cost him something. The murmur began immediately. That broken cowboy. Someone whispered, "What's he want with a wife?" Another snorted, spitting into the dirt. "Lost his ranch, lost his family, ain't fit for nothing but drink. Surprised he's even standing." The words rolled through the crowd, but the woman heard them only faintly, muffled by the rush of blood in her ears. Her gaze locked on him. He stepped forward a little, enough for her to see him clearly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but he walked with a limp, his left leg dragging slightly behind. His coat was worn, his boots scuffed, his hat old. His face, when he tilted his chin up, carried shadows, lines carved by pain, eyes dulled by too many nights staring into nothing. Yet there was something else there too, something quiet and steady, like embers still glowing beneath ash. The auctioneer seized the moment, his gavel ready. "Sold," he barked, before anyone else could object. The crack of wood against wood rang out like a final sentence. Just like that, her fate was sealed. The crowd began to scatter, muttering. As they went, some shaking their heads, others smirking. She stood frozen on the platform, unable to move, her ribbon slipping loose in her trembling fingers. What kind of man had claimed her? Was he her escape or another cage waiting to close around her? The cowboy moved slowly toward her, his steps dragging but sure, each one carrying a weight that seemed to press into the dirt. When he reached her, he stopped, not too close, not yet. He tipped his hat with a small, almost awkward motion, and his voice, when he spoke, was low and rough, like gravel stirred in the bottom of a bucket. "Guess you're mine now." She flinched, not at the words but at the tone. There was no triumph in it, no greed, just a kind of weary acceptance, as if he were speaking more to himself than to her. Then, after a pause, he added, softer still, "But you deserve more than just that." For the first time that day, something in her chest eased. It wasn't safety, not yet. It wasn't love either, but it was enough to let her breathe, enough to let her hope that maybe, just maybe, this hand raised in her favor was not the end of her story but the fragile beginning of another. The murmurs hadn't quieted even after the gavel fell. The crowd thinned, but the whispers trailed behind like dust in the wind. Men spat into the dirt, shaking their heads, calling him a fool. Others chuckled, muttering about how the broken cowboy had finally lost his mind. She stood still on the platform, her legs trembling beneath the weight of uncertainty. She wanted to step down, wanted to move toward him, but her body refused to obey. It was as if invisible chains still held her there. He came closer, his boots heavy against the boards, his limp slowing him but not stopping him. The closer he drew, the clearer he became. The jagged scar that cut across his cheek, the sun-worn skin, the eyes that seemed too tired to shine yet still managed a faint glow when they landed on her. She expected him to reach for her, to take her arm like all the others had done with their new brides. Instead, he paused just an arm's length away, leaving space between them. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. His voice was rough, the kind of voice made for silence rather than words. "I didn't raise my hand to own you. I raised it to keep you from standing there alone." Her throat tightened. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. For weeks, maybe months, she had been passed from one place to another, each man speaking over her, not to her. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be addressed as a person, not a possession. The auctioneer, impatient and eager to be rid of them both, shoved her ribbon into the cowboy's hand and muttered something about paperwork and payment. The man glanced at the ribbon, then looked back at her. He didn't tie it around his wrist like others had done to claim their brides. He simply let it dangle loosely from his fingers, as though it were a fragile thing he had no right to bind. "Come on," he said, softer now, almost awkward. "Let's get you out of here." Her feet finally moved, though each step felt like stepping off a cliff. She followed him through the thinning crowd, aware of the stares burning into her back. The whispers followed too. "She's as broken as he is," someone muttered. Two lost souls, bound to sink together. She tried to ignore them, but they curled around her like smoke. Outside the yard, the town stretched in dusty streets and weather-beaten buildings. Horses stood tied along posts, and wagons rattled over the uneven ground. He led her to a tired-looking horse hitched to an old cart. The leather straps were patched, the wood scarred, but everything was clean, cared for in a way that spoke of quiet pride. He moved slowly as he helped her climb onto the cart, his limp more pronounced now, his breath heavy with the effort. When he settled beside her, the boards groaned under his weight. For a while, they didn't speak. The cart rolled forward, the horse steady and sure, and the town faded behind them. She stared at the horizon where the sun had begun to sink, painting the sky in streaks of amber and red. The silence pressed down, but not in the way it had at the auction. This silence felt gentler, almost thoughtful, as though he was giving her space to breathe. Finally, she gathered the courage to speak. "Why me?" Her voice was small, but it carried. He didn't look at her right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, his jaw working as if he were weighing every word before releasing it. At last, he said, "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. To stand there and have no one see you. No one choose you. I couldn't let that happen again. Not if I could stop it." The honesty in his words struck her harder than she expected. She turned her head to study him. His face was weathered, yes, but there was no cruelty in it, no hunger like she had seen in others' eyes. Instead, there was a depth of sorrow that seemed to stretch endlessly, and beneath it, a stubborn flicker of compassion. She swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Gratitude pressed against her lips, but fear held it back. What if he regretted his choice? What if tomorrow he decided she wasn't worth the coin? She couldn't bear to hope too much, not yet. The cart bumped over a rut, jolting her closer to him. She pulled back quickly, murmuring an apology. To her surprise, he shook his head. "You don't need to be sorry. You don't need to explain yourself to me. Not now, not ever, unless you want to." That simple kindness undid something inside her. Tears stung her eyes, though she blinked them away before they could fall. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years. Tears had always been seen as weakness, something to be punished or exploited. But sitting beside this man, who had raised his hand not for ownership but for mercy, she felt the smallest crack in the walls she had built. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretched across the land. He guided the horse off the main road, down a narrow path lined with mesquite trees. In the distance, she saw the outline of a small cabin, its roof patched, its porch leaning slightly to one side. It wasn't much, but smoke rose from the chimney, and the sight of it stirred something like warmth in her chest. "That's home," he said quietly. There was no pride in his tone, no attempt to dress it up as more than it was. Just honesty. "It ain't big, it ain't fancy, but it's safe. Or at least, I try to make it so." She looked at him again, really looked. The limp, the scar, the weight of loss carved into his shoulders. He was broken, yes, just as the whispers claimed. But broken didn't mean cruel. Broken didn't mean empty. Sometimes broken meant human, and maybe that was more than she had dared to hope for. As they drew closer to the cabin, a strange feeling swelled in her chest, something between fear and fragile hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or the day after, or the years that might follow. But for the first time in a long time, she felt she wasn't being dragged toward her fate. She was stepping into something new, something uncertain, but something that belonged to both of them. And when he glanced at her again, his voice low and almost shy, he said, "We'll figure this out together, if that's all right with you." It was the first time in years someone had asked her if something was all right. The first time her choice had been considered. The answer trembled in her chest, caught between fear and hope, but when she finally let it slip past her lips, it felt like the truest thing she'd ever spoken. "Yes," she whispered. "That's all right with me."